welcome back to Getting to the Top, where I have an extremely rare and amazing guest today. This is going to be so much fun because we're going to be taking it in a different angle today. Today, I have with me Susan Colantuono, and Susan is best known for her TED Talk on the career advice you probably didn't get. And I've been around for a while, and I was surprised when I watched the podcast that what she was sharing and the advice that she was giving was advice that I hadn't been given, but had been intuitive to me. And I was fortunate enough to have that, and that I would attribute to a large part of the catapult of my career. Her podcast has had over 4.5 million views. And I really want her to start by telling us why it's so important for women.
Oh, thank you, Racquel. It's a joy to finally meet you, to be with you and have the opportunity to talk with your audience. So my TED Talk, the career advice you probably didn't get, I'll tell your audience first what the advice is and then how I came to it. So the advice is that for ambitious women who want to move to the top of organizations, it's absolutely crucial that you develop and demonstrate business, financial, and strategic acumen. So I'm really eager to hear how you intuited this. I was never told this in my career. I can't even think of subtle messages that came to me during my career. So it was literally eye-opening to me when I discovered it. And here's how it happened. One of the central passions in my life and questions in my life has always been, how do women move to the top of organizations? And I was there at the very start. I've been around for a while. I was there at the start of women coming into organizations with degrees and career expectations. And what I noticed was that as a few of them moved into management positions, they were really good. So it never occurred to me that women couldn't be outstanding at any level in organizations, and yet they weren't moving up. So this was, let's say, in the early to mid 70s. In the late 90s, so a generation later, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I decided that I wanted to go back to that cause and that interest of helping women move up in organizations. So I was subcontracting to a woman who did a very well-known at the time leadership program for women. And I went through several iterations of it. And I said, this program is basically generic management training with a discussion about work-life balance. Women have been getting generic management training for 20 years, and yet the progress just isn't there to the top of organizations. So in 2000, I read an article, a Business Week article. The cover story was, as leaders, women rule. New studies show that female managers outshine their male counterparts on almost every measure. And at first, I was so excited about that. And then I said, okay, if we're so good, why aren't more of us at the top? And what's that almost relate to? So I dove into the article, and it was a review of multiple studies. I got my hands on the studies that I could, and I looked for the skill sets where women were reported as outperforming men and men were reported as outperforming women. And then I slotted them into my secret weapon, which was my definition of leadership. Just leadership is using the greatness in you to achieve and sustain extraordinary outcomes by engaging the greatness in others. And what I realized in this research was that where managers think that men outperform women, it was all about achieving and sustaining outcomes, specifically business, financial, and strategic acumen. And where managers thought that women outperform men was in engaging greatness in others, and at the time, the personal greatness, knowing yourself and your strengths and attributes, that was pretty equal. So that was the missing 33%. It is the career advice you probably didn't get. 4.5 million women, and actually it's more than that because lots of women's ERGs show it to groups. Anyway, have found it to be helpful. So that's, oh, and one other thing about the research, someone asked me on LinkedIn this past year, oh, come on, it's been 20 years since you did your original research. It can't still be a problem. So I looked at research, the more recent research, it's still a problem.
Of course it is.
So, yeah, yeah. So
No.
yeah, go on.
No,
Sorry.
no, no, definitely. I'm just like, I completely get it. And it's so funny. When I was in high school, I remember, not taking typing because I was like, well, I'll have a secretary. I won't need to know how to type because this gender equality thing is going to be solved by the time I'm, working. So through my college years, because all of the signs showed that women were outperforming men in college, women were outperforming men in high school. So there was no reason for me to believe that this would continue to be a problem. And here I am, many decades later, in awe, in awe. And I mean, if it weren't so upsetting, I would almost be, it was like my experience with COVID. Like COVID, I was more fascinated by COVID because I was like, I'm living through such a historic time. And if it weren't so upsetting, I would be fascinated by this as well. Like, how have we managed to not right this wrong yet?
It is, okay, there is an answer. And it's so unpleasant. It's because of deeply embedded mindsets about women, about men, about leadership and what it looks like and how to move ahead in your careers. So there are mindsets that say that men are only the proper leaders and women should be home. And that mindset is getting a lot of press in the US these days.
Yeah.
There are mindsets that say that the right style of leadership is command and control. And so women who tend to have more engaging styles are restricted because they don't meet that. And then there's the idea that to get ahead, you have to have this direct career trajectory with no gaps and no time off for childcare or parental care, and we're disadvantaged in those ways. So yeah, we should be much further ahead, but
yeah, one of my other guests, I can't remember who it was, but they described it as it's not the glass ceiling, it's a sticky floor. And the sticky floor in middle management where women are performing amazingly, but they're just not moving. They're just not moving up. And I think the advice that you gave was so critical to my career. And I think I happened upon it because I started my career as planning to be a lawyer, was hired by the company that sold us our tech, so law tech. So I ended up selling law tech. And when you're in sales, you're driven by the numbers. You live and die by the numbers. And so the first company that I worked with, the second company that I worked with coming out of the law firm, I outperformed. I sold in 3 months what I was supposed to sell in a year. And they said, well, do you want to go home and wait until we can implement all of this stuff and then continue, or do you? And it was, yes, I'm a decent salesperson, but it was year 2000, and the solutions were selling themselves because everybody was so afraid of year 2000. Microsoft had just come on the scene with Microsoft Office, and so it was just like, and I sold more than they could implement. So they said, we can't have you sell anymore. You destroy the company because we can't find anybody else to implement. So they're like, do you want to teach? Do you want to project manage? Do you want to? So I started handling different parts of the business at that point and getting all of this hands-on experience with having already understood, listen, this is what you need from a financial standpoint. And this is how, why wouldn't you just hire more people? And if you can't find the people, and these are the margins that we're working with, and this is how the business operates. So I was exposed to all of that, and that developed my interest in the financial acumen. And then I moved from
You're
there
so
and I was
lucky.
working. I was really lucky
Yeah.
because that happened at a tipping point in my career. I left there and I worked for JP Morgan Chase, and they were having a problem with customer retention. And they needed to strategically create a solution that will, again, create that stickiness with customers. So we worked on a solution called BizBase on Chase.com, and that was helping their customers get more intertwined with what the offerings of Chase, so that they had more time to resolve a customer service issue. Because if you had just the account and you're like, you know what, it'll take me 2 days to close the account, I'm done with you. This has upset me enough, I'm going. But if you have your general ledger, if you're buying your office supplies, if you have all of these other services through the bank, you're more likely to endure the customer service process. And so that helped me
Endure.
think about it.
Endure. And
But they
I'm
were
sorry, go on. Yeah.
no. And
Yeah.
they were working on the customer service at the same time. But at that large an organization, it's really difficult to kind of maneuver. So you needed to buy that time. So then you have, the financial and then the strategy, because I was like, what a brilliant strategy, right? Because it is, if you have a customer service issue, the quickest thing would be solve the issue. But it's like, we don't have, given the size of this organization, we can't just wave a magic wand. And this is what that timeline looks like. And so it was the exposure to all of these different things with business and the financial and the strategic, and bringing all of those together and being able to see the big picture outside of my individual role, that led to things like, I headed up Microsoft for Trinidad and Tobago. And so, and public sector for Microsoft for the region. And those are the opportunities that opened the doors where I'm heading up this organization on climate change now, and I'm meeting Barack Obama and Richard Branson and Michael Bloomberg, and it's unreal, the life that I have. But I realize it took all of those pieces. And I was fortunate as well in working for Fujitsu, where, I was on the leadership team, and again, exposed to all of these various efforts in that missing 33%. And not understanding that when I go into an interview, I'm able to speak to the objective of the business and show how I can help them to get there. And I think that is absolutely the missing 33% for a lot of women, because they are good, they are excellent, but they don't know how to show what they do specifically can help to direct the ship in the direction it needs to go.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of us, two things happen to a lot of us. One is that we are hyper focused on the work that's in front of us, and sometimes to perfection, which doesn't allow us time to look out and around us. So that's the one thing. You talked about that larger perspective, and oftentimes we don't create opportunities to get that because we stay hyper focused on our work.
Yeah.
The other thing that tends to happen to us is that we get messaged, formal and informal messaging, over and over and over, that leadership is about working with your team. It's about gaining the respect of your team. It's about motivating your team. And yes, that's all true, but in the context of business, leadership is also about that big picture. It's about the finances and understanding the story they tell. And it's about understanding the whole business and being able to take actions for the business and making the connection of your value to the larger business. So you were, very lucky.
I was very lucky. And when you read, Indra Nouri's My Life in Full, and what got you here isn't what's going to get you there. All of those books talk about having this broad base of experience across the organizations that can help you to figure out, wait, what is the big picture that this organization is moving towards? And what is my role in helping them get there? So tell me about your career and how these bits helped you.
Oh, okay. So I have a couple of examples because I wanted to give your audience concrete examples that
Mhm.
they might apply. And one of them is that because I had developed my definition of leadership, which is leadership is using the greatness in you, your skills and attributes, worldview, to achieve and sustain extraordinary outcomes, to get results, but through your business, financial, and strategic acumen, by engaging the greatness in others. One of the things I did, not in my corporate career, but as a business owner, was, but you can do this as a corporate person. I asked myself at the start of every day, what outcomes do I have to move forward today? So that's the business, financial, strategic acumen.
Mhm.
Who do I have to engage in order to move them forward? And on what personal greatness am I going to draw in order to have those positive interactions to move the outcomes forward? So I used my definition of leadership daily at the start of each day to outline what I had to be focused on in the day ahead. Now, it didn't always stick because things, as you know, come in
Of
from
course.
the outside. But I did that at the start of every day. And then at the end of every day, I asked, how did I do?
Yeah.
So that kind of daily practice that takes no time, that you can do whether you're driving to work or walking from your bedroom to your home office, is extremely powerful. So that's one thing that helped me. And I was able to, in 3 years, I made a strategic shift in my old business. And within 3 years, because I was so disciplined and because of some other things, I was able to increase revenue 400%. And I'm not talking like from $1,000 up. I mean,
Right.
it was substantial to start. So yeah, so that's one way that I used business, strategic, and financial acumen in order to be successful.
And that's such a great point, huh? Because so many women can't or don't on their resumes, and people in general. But I think that while it's something that's optional for men, it's mandatory for women to understand numerically and measurably how you impacted a business and to have that on your resume so that it is clear. I don't care what your job is. Like, I know what an analyst does, I know what a secretary does, I know what a chief of staff does, I know what most of the roles that you'll see, they're not new roles. I know what those roles do. What I want to see on somebody's resume is what did you bring to that role? And how do you understand your impact on that business? And so many people, and women especially, miss that opportunity to say, I increased sales by 400%. I was able to, and you don't wait till you're at the end of that job updating your resume to figure out what that is. You go in the door saying, these are, whether they're the organization's KPIs or your own, this is how I'm going to measure success in this role. And these are the things that I'm going to measure. And having that daily practice of checking in and checking at the end so that you're clear, this is how I'm moving the needle every single day. So that at the end of it, you've added it all up and you are very clear. And that can help you in negotiation, that can help you in your next job, that can help you in your one-to-ones. You need to understand, and no one else but you is responsible for how are you performing against the objectives in your role.
Right. 100% agree. You remind me that in my book, No Ceiling, No Walls, I talk about it's specifically related to resumes. I talk about the difference between inputs, activities, results, and outcomes. So
Yeah.
inputs on a resume would be, I managed a staff of 500 and my budget was $58 million, which is ridiculous. That would never be the case if you have 500 staff. Anyway, so that's inputs. Activities are what you were talking about. I run projects, and here are the things that I do. I do agile, or I develop training programs or whatever. So those are activities. Activities require inputs, so money, et cetera, resources. It could be even I run manufacturing. So, my inputs are raw materials. So inputs, activities, results are intermediary between the activity and the outcome. And a lot of times people, women, get confused about the difference between results and those financial outcomes that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Results are things like the project, and I have another example to share. The project came in on time and on budget. Well, that's great that it's on time and on budget, so there was no money lost there. But why was the project funded? That's the outcome. Was the
Yeah.
project funded to increase days cash on hand? Was
Yeah.
it funded to help increase sales or was it funded to grow in a new market? What? So if it's on time and on budget, that's great, but did it hit the outcomes? And I learned that early in my career. Of course, I didn't do much with it then. When it was, research found that most computer system projects, they might have been done on time and on budget, but they weren't delivering what the company paid for them to deliver. 85% at the time. So
Wow.
yeah. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and you have to be able to contextualize, because again, if it delivered on time and on budget, what was the budget? Was it a $200,000 budget? Was it a $5 million budget? Because organizations want to understand, can you do what we need you to do? Can you deliver what we need you to deliver? Do you understand the requirements of our business? And these are the things you need to, I once had some of the best advice that I gotten from an interviewing standpoint was, what does the interviewer need to know? And it isn't that you are necessarily the best candidate, because you don't know what you're benchmarking against and you don't know who else they've seen. What you know is, I understand your business so well, and I understand what you do so well that I can demonstrate to you how I will deliver against those objectives.
Right.
And it is that I understand your needs and I understand what you require. And it is an opportunity to have that conversation. And I think a lot of people don't even understand the importance of questions. Like, asking the right questions demonstrates that you understand the business and you know what are the things that you need to figure out in order to have the answer at the end.
Right. And in order to execute the impact that you ultimately get paid to do.
Yes. No, I love it. So both of us have benefited from business savvy in our careers. So is that why you've
You
launched
much earlier? No, you much earlier than I. I didn't benefit until I was way along the line.
So I think, there's a saying, I'm not Jamaican, but I'm Caribbean. And there's a saying in Jamaica called buck ups. And clearly it wasn't until I listened to your TED Talk that I was like, oh my gosh, I literally fell bass backwards into this. Luckily, because this is the information, this is the piece. I was like, oh my God, the missing 33%. This is it. This is it. This is the piece that's missing. We found it.
That's so funny. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's how I felt. That's how I felt.
So, I just, you've launched this company, Be Business Savvy.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, like, we talked before we started about me and doing this podcast, and it wasn't something that I wanted to do or needed to, something that I had to do. I couldn't imagine. I had to speak in front of, when I was head of Microsoft, speak in front of some students. And I'm seeing these young women with all of this promise, these girls in STEM and tech, and they're doing these amazing things and they're creating these amazing apps. And I had to say to them, we failed you. My generation has failed you because, and I burst into tears. I said, because we should have solved this gender equity problem by now. And now you are coming up and we're having to pass the baton to you to try and unravel this system, because you deserve a seat at the table. Your talent requires that you
Yeah.
deliver solutions that can help all of us. And so, I'm hoping Be Business Savvy is, another block that helps to just close this gap.
Me too. That's why I started it. Can I share one more example? Because as I
Sure.
think about it, it connects with what you've been saying about tying your worth. And this was something that happened when I was working inside of a corporation and just beginning to learn about the importance of the missing 33%. I was the only non-executive chosen to be on a project team to open a new emergency department in a medical center. And I was responsible for designing the training. And in order to open the emergency department, everybody who worked there had to be trained. We had external training requirements from the Joint Commission on Hospital Accreditation. We had external training requirements from the fire department for fire safety. There were external training requirements that required everyone from doctors to maintenance workers get trained. So I convened a team of the heads of certain departments representing the entire cross-section. We had our first meeting, and being a person who was trained in organizational development and team building, and we did team building, and we identified our mission for the team, and it felt great that everyone was collaborating, from doctors to nurses to allied health professionals to maintenance people. And so great, successful first meeting. Everyone went off with their tasks. The next week, I had to meet with the project team. So it was the CFO, the head of nursing, the head physician, the head of operations. I mean, it was all the executive team and me. So everyone had to report on what they had done. So everyone's talking about blah, 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 and it's my turn. And I said, oh, I convened my team. It's the first time that I know of that the hospital's ever had people from every department gather together. And we had a good team building kickoff. And I looked at the CFO, who I really wanted to impress because, well, he was a great resource for the leadership program that I delivered there. And, career impact person. And he was like nodding off. It was like rolling his eyes in the back of his head. He was unimpressed. So I left feeling so downhearted. But I had started to be learning about the importance of business, financial, and strategic acumen. So I said, okay, Susan, what does the CFO need to know?
Yeah.
That's your point, right? What's my role in impacting the business? You've said it several times. So I said, okay, he needs to know that we can deliver this training without costing any more compensation than has been allocated. We need to deliver this training so that the ED opens on time, so that the revenue that has been promised by virtue of this investment begins to roll in on schedule. He needs to know that there will be no stakeholder activity that would slow the opening or that would result in fines, so additional adverse financial impact. So I said, oh, okay, now I know what to do at the next meeting. So I went into the next meeting. Well, no, this was a few meetings later because we had to have intern meetings. And I said, okay, we have our training plan. And our training plan is budget neutral. It will ensure that everyone who needs to get trained. So we meet all the external requirements. It will ensure, and the way we're doing it will ensure that the department, the new ED will open on time. And our budgeting kind of set up and said, good job, Susan. So
Nice.
So to your point, the more a woman can understand her direct impact on the financials and or the strategy and or the business direction, the stronger her performance, the better she'll be perceived as an asset to the organization and some with future potential.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I say to a lot of young women, you know, nobody cares about you. And I don't mean that in a callous way, but so many of them either come to me or go to an interview talking about what they want. People
Yeah.
want to hear about what they want. What are they interested in? And that was exactly what you were able to do, to quickly recover and figure out, what does this person need to hear, because I want to get my foot in the door. And I appreciate that an interview is a two-way street, but far too often everyone is only looking at it from their perspective. I had, oh, this wonderful guest, Ingrid. She was talking about your window at the hotel. And so depending on where you are in the building, you know, in this sort of mental building, you are only seeing from your vantage point. But what you need to train yourself to do is to figure out somebody who's over here, what are they looking at? Somebody who's over here, what are they looking at? And what is it that they want to see? And how can you help them to deliver that? Because when you start having that external perspective, that bigger perspective where you understand what other people need, you're invaluable and you're
Yes.
unstoppable. And you can write your own check and you can decide where you go. And you're not having to be at the whim and fancy of someone else saying, this is what you're allowed to do, or this is where you're allowed to go.
Right. And you're a great example of that. And the women who benefit from your counsel and guidance are so lucky. I have to say, they are so lucky.
Listen, it has been, with all things
Yeah.
with me, it's a journey. So I was most often described as a bull in a china shop. And I'm now, I don't know that I'm yet a ballerina in a china shop, but I have not been in the last at least decade been described as a bull in a china shop. So progress.
Good, good. Definitely progress. Yeah.
Yes. So, you know, to summarize, what you're
Mm,
telling women, right, is that with business savvy, they can have greater career success, be stronger leaders, be more confident, self-promote with ease. And I think that it's going to help so many of us with the challenges that we face. I mean, for example, speaking up, demonstrating executive presence,
mm.
getting the most out of mentoring, and understanding the value that you bring to make you a stronger negotiator, but also understanding, like, you know, being able to do something that's meaningful to you, so that you
Yes.
understand, what am I bringing to this? Why does this excite me? Why should I get up out of my bed to do this? You understand what you're delivering. And I think that that is so important as well. That's how you bring the enthusiasm to the work that you're doing.
100%. Yes. And for any of your listeners who would like to get better with business savvy, I have a free blog, I have a free podcast, and we've talked about you coming on as a guest. I can't wait to do that, especially after this conversation. I have a newsletter and I do offer courses. There's one that's launching next month, and there will be more in the pipeline. I'm very excited about those, all to help women be business savvy.
I think that's phenomenal. And one of the books that I've recently read talks about the importance of repetition. So you might hear this advice and it might resonate with you, and you may even feel like, oh my God, the light bulb has gone off.
Mm.
But in order to make this a part of who you are, and to change your paradigm, and to have this be a part of how you operate, you're going to have to engage with this material
Yeah.
at a more intimate level. So I really encourage you to take advantage of the resources that Susan is offering, because I definitely believe that it can make a difference in your career.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you so much for staying with us. I told you this was going to be an
Thank you.
exciting one. You know, this was such serendipity. We quoted Suzanne because we loved her TED Talk. And then she, you know, we tagged her in it to say, hey, thanks. This was a fantastic talk. And she said, hey, thanks. And we were like, oh my gosh, she responded. And we didn't even have a process that said, what do you do when the TED Talk that you're enamored with responds?
That's so funny.
So we had to figure that out. And
Yeah.
here we are.
Here we
Thank you
are. It's
so
been a
much.
joy. Absolutely. I can't wait to get you on my podcast. And we are going to have so much fun
Love
as
it.
we did today. Yes. Yes. Thanks so much for
Absolutely.
the honor of being able to be with you and meet you and share information with your audience.
The honor was mine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.